Hello. Well, in addition to constructive trusts in the context of directors' duties, which we've looked at with our Regal, Hastings and Gulliver video at Anfield, there's also another major area where constructive trusts have been used, other than the area of common intention constructive trusts, which makes up the main substance of how we on this course engage with constructive trusts. I thought I'd provide this brief video for you to think about this other area, this introductory phase anyway, that we'll look at, and that's constructive trusts in the context of fraudulent or unconscionable behaviour. And I thought we could look at this area whilst you gaze upon Everton Park and the view from Everton Park across eventually to the Welsh hills. You can see there in the background the Wirral, of course the Mersey and the mouth of the Mersey, and then some of the major landmarks of Liverpool there, with the Dock Road then leading up across into the city centre, and eventually of course over to the Liver building and the rest of the Three Graces, round to the cathedrals, and then of course the university. So while you're looking at that view from Everton Park, I thought I'd run through a number of cases that illustrate this fraudulent or unconscionable behaviour deployment of the constructive trust. So the first case I'll touch on, where we see equity giving relief against fraud by making a person who's implicated in that fraud accountable in equity. We'll see the first case is Cleaver and Mutual Life Assurance, which is an 1892 decision. And in that case, the facts were briefly stated that the wife poisoned her husband. And the court, of course, thought it would be unconscionable for her to be able to benefit from his life insurance. So the claim for the life insurance was held on constructive trust. The next case is Reading against Attorney General. And here the facts briefly stated. You had an army sergeant who used his uniform and position to help him in a smuggling ring, whereby he made £20,000, and that's in 1890. Well, he was caught and imprisoned, and the money was confiscated. But when he was released, with some chutzpah, he tried to claim the money back, but it was said that the money was held on constructive trust for his employer, who of course was the Crown, as he'd used his position as a sergeant in the army to obtain that money. So a constructive trust being imposed on those monies. The next case I'll tell you about is in Reid, DWS Deceased, which is a 2000 authority. Here, a son murdered his parents, but his parents had died intestate. So the question before the court was whether or not the son could inherit as next of kin. Of course, you could argue, or it was argued, that this was unconscionable. So the money was held on constructive trust for the other relatives other than the son, who was, of course, a murderer. Well, the final case I'll tell you about is Attorney General for Hong Kong and Reid, which is a very interesting case. Of course, Mr. Reid was the Director of Public Prosecutions in Hong Kong. He'd received bribes to induce him not to prosecute certain criminals. And then he'd used the money from those bribes to buy property in New Zealand, which of course substantially increased in value. Well, it goes up to the Privy Council, and eventually it's held that the bribes and the property that was bought with them, when it could be traced, were imposed with a constructive trust. That's to say, it wasn't just the initial bribe money, but any profit made from it as well. Again, held on constructive trust for the Crown. So there are some early authorities for you to think about, going from Cleaver, Reading, right through to DWS and of course Attorney General and Reid, where constructive trusts have been deployed on where fraudulent or unconscionable behaviour has arisen. We'll mull on this perhaps in due course in a bit more depth when we look at trustees in the second semester. But for now, from Everton Park and this magnificent view of the lovely city of Liverpool, I bid you goodbye. So goodbye.